Good evening. This is the JP Dinnell podcast, episode 10. I am JP Dinnell, and as always, I have Lucas with me. So the last 8 to 9 days has been a little strange. I have not been able to really sleep during the night. I have either been wide awake, tossing and turning, or a combo of the two throughout the night. It's strange because it usually lasts until around 4 a.m. or 4:45 a.m. And then I will just pass out hard for a few hours until I need to get up for work, any work stuff I got to do. Even being on the road, thankfully last week it was Thanksgiving, so I had a little bit of grace there. Or when I got to get up to get the day going. Now it's been nice because I have an awesome wife who knows I've been struggling with this, and once I'm out cold, she'll let me sleep until I need to get up, and she'll help facilitate whatever needs to get taken care of in the morning with the kids, which I've been feeling crappy not helping with that stuff, but she's super understanding and literally tells me like, hey, don't worry about it, you need to get some sleep. So it's been pretty strange. I can't figure out what is causing it and honestly what to do to fix it. I've even taken sleep stuff at night to help me get some sleep, and it literally does nothing. So it's a lot of extra time, and I've tried to use the time to spend reading the Bible. I've actually been writing and just trying to lean into what God has for me, just to kind of listen and just see what I'm missing. Last night around 4:50, I sent the following to our Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu group with you, Lucas, and it said, there's a screenshot of a picture, and it says, some things don't need more prayer. They need discipline. God already told you what to do. You're just procrastinating. And I felt like that was speaking to me. And I sent it to the group, not for accountability for any of the other guys, but it was for me. And I'm glad that I did because it really sparked a really good conversation. A few hours later, the conversation sparked up as the guys were waking up and I was getting up and getting ready for church. And I moved that conversation over to a group text without you, Lucas, because I knew you were preaching at the time and I did not want to be blowing up your phone. Stephen's pastor recently did a sermon, and Isaac responded in the group text with a quote from the sermon saying, "Sometimes the areas of lack in your life are not caused by a lack of faith, but a lack of discipline." This conversation sparked a lot of really good conversations around a full surrender to God, obedience to God, disobedience, and stewardship. And of course, Amanda and I go to church today, and the theme to the message was stewardship, and which was good. It was a great sermon by one of our pastors, Pastor Jed, who I absolutely love. We go to Milestone in Keller, and he's just a phenomenal speaker and teacher. And, as I was up late last night and this conversation, it reminded me of a new book that I started reading called As Many Reps as Possible by Jason Khalipa. You can actually order that book on Amazon, which I suggest you do. It's a great read with applicable information for everyone who reads it. Again, that's As Many Reps as Possible by Jason Khalipa. That's Khalipa. I've actually been able to become good friends with Jason over the last year. We met down in San Diego at Jocko's gym in person to get some jiu-jitsu in. I actually met him up in St. Louis up at the First Form headquarters. We've just stayed in contact over it's been a couple of years since we first originally met and became, I would say good friends this last year. He was also at a Origin Immersion Jiu-Jitsu camp. We send text messages back and forth to each other. He came to our field training exercise that we did at Echelon Front to dive into the leadership problems that he's struggling with his businesses, and not saying that his businesses are struggling, but as a leader, as he's been growing and expanding his business, he has those normal struggles. So he came to an FTX. He's just a phenomenal individual. And I'm proud to call him a friend. He was actually just on Jocko's podcast, episode 412, so episode 412, as they reviewed his new book, Share His Story. I suggest all of you guys go listen to episode 412 of the Jocko podcast. It's absolutely awesome. Jocko does a great job, as always, breaking in and diving into the books. And Jason just sharing his story. I mean, Jason's an incredible human. an incredible father, husband, and athlete, and what he has done in the CrossFit world is absolutely impressive. I don't want to misquote this, but I believe he's been to the CrossFit Games 8 different times and placed at a very legitimate level. Been on the podium multiple times, and in the book, he talks about the AMRAP mentality and how it can be applied to business and all these other things. And it reminds me of what we were talking about earlier, what I was just reading about, the text messages, what I've been thinking about, the group conversation we have. So I want to read the section really quickly from his book. It says, "This is how the AMRAP mentality works. It demands focus, hard work, the ability to shift gears, and the ability to reevaluate. Not just every other minute, not just once an hour, every minute, for as many reps as possible. At first, you have to give it a lot of thought and concentrate on each individual piece, but soon it becomes automatic." And I loved that portion of the book. And honestly, I think there's a lot that we can actually unpack from that as we also dive into some of the Q&A. We've gotten some awesome questions on YouTube, on Instagram, so we want to dive into that. And I just want to let you guys know, next episode, we're going to do a debrief on episode 8 and 9 that we just did with Ryan Vaughn. We actually want to give people a little extra time, a little extra week to catch up on those episodes. And honestly, think about that. Those were episode 8 was pretty deep. It was crazy. There was a lot of stuff that was there. My mom said she had to stop it multiple times because she was in tears crying. I've gotten that feedback from men and women just all across the United States of just saying how powerful that podcast was. So we want to give you guys a little extra time to think about it, digest it before we address it again. But yeah, what's up, buddy? How are you, Lucas?
What's going on, man?
I'm good. How are you this evening?
Do you feel rested?
Yeah, I got a couple hours of sleep like you did, but I'm good to go. I'm good.
I'm glad we're finally getting to sit down and do some more of the Q&A. Like all of the stuff with Ryan, I'm having like marinate over, right? So I'm glad.
To be honest, I wasn't ready to do the debrief because like you, I've just been really having to think about it and there's a lot to unpack there.
Oh man, we'll get into it in the debrief, but it's incredible. And one of the books that I'm reading right now is about a lady who was married to a naval seaman while he was over in Vietnam. He purchased her with 2 cows, and then after the end of the war, he had to illegally go back to Vietnam and get his wife and bring her home. And it's wild. So there are a couple of things that Ryan talked about that he didn't go in depth on, and she's got some passages in her book that I want to bring to you and kind of read to sort of add context to some of the stuff that he like talked around. Yeah. So that our listeners really understand. Like the next episode, you'll want to listen to it and then go back and listen to episode 8. Yeah. Because it'll add some context and some value to it. But that's not what we're here to do tonight.
No, and you know what I thought was impressive with Ryan as well is that was the first time he had ever shared his story in this capacity.
Really?
Ever. Usually it was just a few friends, family members. Right. That was it, casually. Yeah. And for him to be able to sit down and articulate the message he articulated, I thought was impressive.
It was really awesome.
Yeah. So I know we've had some questions on YouTube
we've got
and Instagram.
Some questions from internet.
But what do you got? I mean, is there any questions or any thoughts on what I just talked about? Because, I mean, as I'm just thinking about that quote, some things you don't need sometimes, or some things you don't need more prayer. They need discipline. God already told you what to do. You're just procrastinating. And then I love the AMRAP mentality. It's just like, hey, demands focus, hard work, the ability to shift gears, the ability to reevaluate. More importantly, like what that's saying, like you have to do the work. Yeah. You have to do the work. Like the OODA Loop. OODA, the most important part of that, and we've talked about it before, and even Ryan Vaughn brought it up as he's talking about like, the Extreme Ownership Academy stuff, is the A stands for act. You have to act. You have to take action. And, I think, a lot of people struggle with that. Yeah. It's not a normal tendency for people to be default aggressive and just go work, get the work done. And so anyways, I just kind of want to open up the door to that because I think some of our questions also like kind of dance around this, right?
Right. So as I'm looking from, and we'll get to our questions from Instagram here in a minute, but as I'm looking at all of those and I'm listening to what you're saying, so much of what you have dealt with what you sent in that message, which I appreciate the self-censorship, because I was teaching Bible study this morning and I was preaching this morning, so there was a lot going on, and I totally butchered a song when we started. I started off, I had my capo in the wrong place for you musicians. I started in the wrong key, and my wife was singing. Yeah.
That's
so
cool.
That makes for a fun lunch conversation when I've got to stop and be to the entire congregation, hey, I screwed this up. So anyway, that's it. The action piece tends to be the hardest. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we encounter with a lot of leaders is that they almost naturally do pieces of the OODA Loop.
Yeah.
Right? They'll naturally observe what's going on. They'll be able to think about what it is that they need to do in order to create a favorable scenario, but they fail to act. And I really think that text that you sent was incredibly powerful, because so many people ask, and this is a question that we've gotten online from several people, so I'm not going to attribute it to any one person, is, how do we know what God's purpose is for our life? And so many people as Christians are kind of circling that, that thing. It's like, if I just knew what God wanted me to do, I would do it. Yeah. And I don't know if I know what God wants me to do. So yeah. So question number one, JP.
Okay.
How do we know what God's purpose is for our life? So
this reminds me of the question that Ian Hamilton asked as well. It's like, finding purpose and fulfillment outside the SEAL teams. And so my initial thought process is, we really have to be leaning in and trying to listen to what God has to say to us. And when I say listen, meaning are you paying attention to signs and hints and things that are popping up and things that are coming into your life and opportunities that you have. And so the problem is, I think most humans, we have this mindset of what we think we want to do and what we want to do that's going to be of service to the kingdom or what God, it'll make God happy. If we're doing this, and if I'm doing this, then, hey, I'm a good person. I'm doing all these things. God truly will be happy. Hey, I'm tithing. I'm going to church. I'm a good neighbor. I'm helping my community. I'm a good husband, and I have a good relationship, and I'm doing all these things. I mean, and you can be doing all those things, but actually not be fulfilling what God has intended for you. And so I think we have to initially kind of think about, and this also applies to people that don't believe in God yet. They don't have a relationship with God. It's because they're trying to find a purpose.
Absolutely.
It's not about what you think you want to do, but it's what you should be doing. And what you should be doing, it'll make sense because it ties into with what your skill sets are, and also what provides value. What do you get satisfaction from? And that's not from and it's hard for me to properly articulate this, because people are well, I get satisfaction from making money. Okay, cool. Temporarily. Yep. What, and I know this sounds cheesy, but people hear it hey, if you could do something and you weren't getting paid, what would you do? And for me, people's, it's Echelon Front. It's exactly what I'm doing at Echelon Front. It's doing this podcast. It's doing Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu. It's helping out with the pursuit ministries. Those are the things that I like doing, and I would continue, which the ministry we don't get paid from, helping on the ministry, we don't get paid from. Podcast, we don't get paid from this, but Echelon Front, I get paid from. Yeah. And I would do it whether I got paid or not. If I didn't have to, let's just say one of my investments went through and it's cool, babe, we're good. I would still keep doing what I'm doing. And I know I've said that before on this podcast and other podcasts as well. I know on Jocko's podcast, I talked about it. It's because I have fulfillment of serving other people. I'm serving other people. And I think some people, they get wrapped up in the title or the position or what it actually is, instead of no. Are you serving people? Are you taking care of them? Hey, you could be working at a coffee shop, and You could be honoring God through your actions by working really hard, by being a good employee, by being a good business partner, by going above and beyond, and literally making it your mission every single day when you're serving somebody a cup of coffee to make sure you say, hey, I hope you're having a great day. Is there anything I could be praying for you about?
Yeah.
Think about if you just, let's say you managed a coffee shop and that was your goal, was to say, hey, I'm going to deliver the absolute best customer service every single day, no matter what. Like, I don't care what's going on in the world, what's going on in my life. When I come here, it's game on. Yeah. Like when I walk through the door, it's like, this is the same thing I do at Echelon Front.
Right.
We all do. I don't care what's happening in the world, what's happening in my life. It's game time. Like when I'm doing an event, it is game time. And my whole mission is to share the lessons that we learned in combat, the same lessons that we taught guys to prepare for combat, so that people can apply it to their business and their personal lives. And that's all I care about doing. And so in order for me to do that, I have to be on. I have to be 100%. I have to be able to have energy. I have to be able to listen with intent, not just talk. We're not just up there talking, clicking through PowerPoint slides. We're actually sharing stories, sharing lessons, talking, interacting, tying people's questions into the content, actually having back and forth conversations. Like you are on all day long. I'm very thankful for what I get to do because I'm sharing something that's very passionate to me. But let's just say life is giving you the opportunity where the only thing that you have right now, the opportunity, is you're working at a coffee shop. And you're like, hey, this isn't the ideal job. I don't really want to do this. But you know what? Hey, you know what, God? Thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide income to my family.
Yeah.
And you made it your goal is to where no matter what was happening, your purpose for that day was to provide absolutely amazing customer service, to make somebody happy, to show somebody what like a good human looks like, to show somebody what an actual Christian looks like and acts like, and then had the opportunity to talk to people all throughout the day and say, hey, is there anything I could be praying for you for today? And maybe everybody says no except for one person. And then one person throughout the day says, you know what? Me and my spouse are going through a really hard time. I don't know who to talk to. If you could just pray for my marriage, that would really help me out. And then you act, and then you actually did that,
right.
And you actually prayed for that person. I think that's an amazing thing that you could be doing, because people get so wrapped up in like these titles and these positions and thinking like they've got to be doing something big and massive to honor God. That may be for you and that may not be for you. And I think it comes back to like the intent of being humble and be willing to be thankful. I think that's the biggest thing, is if you're thankful for the opportunities that you have, you honor God through your actions and through your hard work and your discipline and your dedication. That's what my parents taught us to do. It's like, hey, it doesn't matter what you do in life. Like if you're working hard, like, hey, if you have a job, you should honor your boss by working hard. And in turn, you're honoring God, because God gave you the opportunity to have this job. It may not be ideal, but it's a job and you need to do it. And that's why I always saw my parents working hard. I'm sure my parents had jobs that they weren't stoked about, but they never really complained to us about them. And I can tell you, as kids, we never heard them complain about work. Not once. I have never, as a kid, now as an adult, you get to have different conversations with your parents. Yeah,
absolutely.
But even then they've never really like complained. It was just like, but as a kid, now I knew my parents worked super hard and they did stuff that wasn't ideal, like work-wise. But I mean, dude, they showed us like you work hard. And so to answer that question with like a simple statement, I know I've talked a lot about it. I have so many thoughts on that. Like it's a really good question. I have so many thoughts. I think for me, it's one, do you feel that you have fulfillment by serving others? And is what you're wanting to do driven by your ego? Yeah. And I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah, that's a great barometer.
Because I don't think I can give anybody a specific answer, because the indicators are going to be different for each individual.
Absolutely. And from a biblical perspective, there are two separate instructions that Jesus gives for purpose. One is when he talks about what the greatest commandment is, right? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength, and in every way acknowledge him, and to love your neighbor as yourself. there's that. And then the Great Commission being the second, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them everything that I've commanded you, right? Mm-hmm. So the base purpose of every believer is those two things. And both of those things start with, exactly like you said, they start with service, right? And so I think when we're talking about Christians finding our purpose, that's the first thing to do. The difficult part is like you talked about, is the A part of the OODA Loop. Because particularly in the millennial generation, which we found out we're both kind of like on depending
cusp.
On who you ask for,
Whatever.
Yeah, we're kind of on the cusp of it, is we have been told that we have to find our passion. And Gen Z's been told the same thing, like you have to find your passion, right? And one of your sayings that has really stuck with me and stuck with a lot of our listeners is you can make excuses or you can make things happen. You can't do both. Yeah. Right. So what if me not being able to find my passion, I'm like, all right, I got to get rid of this. Now I'm stuck in a job that I don't like, don't feel like I can do that. There's so many people that instead of even getting to that point where they're ready to act, you're talking about in a coffee shop gig. I mean, that was job number 1 of 4 for me when, we were talking about that on, I think all the way back in like episode 1, right? So when we're stuck in the OOD part of the OODA Loop, right? We're observing, we're orienting,
deciding.
Yeah. We're stuck on the D part. How do we shake ourselves loose to where we act, right? There was a guy, and your quote made me think of this that you sent us this morning, that said, perfectionists are just procrastinators in disguise. Because all you're really doing if you're a perfectionist is you're waiting until the last minute so that whatever you do is good enough. Like, okay, now, I can just say that I'm a perfectionist, but really I'm just a procrastinator because I'm waiting until the last minute so that I can't go back and make corrections and do all of this other stuff.
Got it.
Yep. So how do we shake ourselves loose of being in the OOD loop and get to that act point?
Well, it's making those small iterative decisions. You're not overcommitting to anything. You again, going back to, I think what I just said is, okay, hey, do you have fulfillment? Is it as service to others? And then go from there. And is it one that you like doing?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes or no? No. Okay. Then maybe that's not what you should be doing. Is it you don't like doing it or you don't want to do it? Now that's the thing.
That's a different question.
Yes. Yeah. And you have to ask yourself those things, because I didn't want to be delivering pizzas, but I needed to.
Yeah.
Because there was, again, you can make excuses or you can make things happen. You can't do both. Like, I had bills that needed to be paid. I had a truck payment. I had rent. I had groceries for my family that needed to be provided. Okay. Well, how do I do that? I tried all these other things. I mean, I can't remember. I don't remember what podcast I was on of Jocko's or Andy Frisella's, but I tried and I applied to do security, like loss prevention at Lowe's in South Haven, Mississippi, for extra income. And they said I was overqualified because of my resume. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not asking you guys to pay me for what you think I should get paid. Can I have this job? They were hiring for it. They wouldn't hire me because they felt they couldn't pay me what I needed. I'm like, I don't care. Will you pay me? Cool. Coupons? I'll take them. Like that's how it was. And I couldn't get paid. I even Walmart. I looked at Walmart about restocking the shelves in the middle of the night while everyone's sleeping. I'm like, all right, cool. I can get a couple hours of sleep, go stock the shelves at Walmart, get a couple hours of sleep, help a man to get the kids. Like, I even tried that. Like, I could, and it's just like, okay. And I was at my buddy's pizza place that he opened up, and he was just talking about hiring people and, needing drivers and everything. I was like, hey man, I'll drive for you. He's like, no, man, I don't want you to have to do that. I'm like, no, you don't. Let me rephrase that. I could actually, and I had to really subordinate my ego and humble myself and say, hey, I could actually use the extra work. He goes, oh, cool. And we literally started the process that day. And again, delivering pizzas wasn't ideal, but and then doing the extra hours after delivery to clean up the kitchen and, doing all that stuff. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't what I wanted to be doing, but it's what I needed to be doing. And the other thing is I also know that there are going to be times in life that you just have to do stuff that's not ideal.
Yeah.
It's not because, some people are like, oh, God was testing your faith. Maybe. Or maybe it was just because of bad decisions I had made and put myself in a situation that I needed to work out of. And so I just, for me, just ask, you just really have to, right here, the ability to reevaluate. You have to do honest self-assessments. And the problem is people aren't willing to do honest self-assessments. And that's what causes that's what causes people to have the problem of making the small iterative decision. Yeah. They can't make a small decision because their ego's in the way. They haven't done an honest self-assessment and they're not willing just to take a small step. I'm not saying hey, go, I didn't get a job at Marco's Pizza saying I'm going to own a Marco's Pizza one day. I just needed to provide income to my family. And so I made a small iterative decision. I was doing that. I went door to door. Hey, do you guys want your address spray painted on the front curb of your house, so that first responders can easily see it? What's it going to cost? And there's yep, cool, cash. Did that all day long. You can make a couple $100s in one day.
Yeah.
Don't tell me you can't go make money. You can. There was a couple days I made $500 cash.
Spray painting addresses?
In one day. Yes. And so it's just, it was a long day, but who cares? $500 in one day, cash.
Yeah.
So it just, I have a really hard time when people are just I don't know what to do. Go do something. And my parents always said hey, if you need a job, go get a job. And it doesn't have to be the perfect job. Find the ideal and perfect job when you're working a job. Just be doing something.
Yeah.
Don't sit around and be oh, I'm gonna the whole perfectionist thing. I'm just waiting for the perfect job to come about. Okay, well, guess what? You can search for that perfect job while you're doing something right now. And I think there's something to the fact of hey, God's going to bless you and open up doors and make things a little more apparent to you when you're honoring him through your hard work.
Yep.
And you're honoring him through your humility of saying, hey, you know what? You want me to be cleaning out the drains here because these teenagers didn't know that this wasn't a garbage disposal and you can't just shove all the food down the sink drain instead of scraping it off into the garbage can. And I remember I was pissed off and I had up to my biceps in this dirty, nasty sink water, which, by the way, that's something that I've always hated doing.
Sink water?
Dirty sink water. Ugh. The food and all the...
Sorry for all you listeners who are triggered by that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny is I get triggered, but stop it. Don't do it. And so I remember, and I was just I was frustrated. And then I just realized, I'm they don't understand that this isn't a garbage disposal. This is actually a teaching opportunity for these people, these kids, right? Yeah. And so I think small iterative decisions helps people get out of that, the fear of making a decision and overcommitting. Because let's say you make a small decision and it's a wrong decision. What difference does that small decision make? None. Yeah. Now, if you make a big commitment, let's say, Jocko's talked about this multiple times. He's talked about leadership, strategy, and tactics. And you make these small little iterative decisions to help you work through those problems. And then if it's working, cool, keep doing it. Expand until it doesn't. And then you reevaluate and you readjust.
Yeah. So when we're talking about small iterative decisions, what in your mind is a small decision? Because deciding that I'm going to spend my nights going to deliver pizza because that's what I have to do to provide for my family may be a small decision to somebody in your position at the time, right? Yeah. That is hey, I've got to figure out how to make ends meet. Other people are being very nice to me saying, hey, you're overqualified for this position, but being overqualified doesn't pay the bills, right? What was it Ryan said? Happiness doesn't buy dinner, honey, right?
Yes, I love that.
So that in your situation, that was a small iterative decision. But for a lot of people who are relatively comfortable when they get home, but when they go to work, they're in jobs they don't like. What is a small iterative decision to get them closer to their goals that they can make, that can get them started toward getting on the path?
Okay, on a self-evaluation, desire and capabilities, they're two different things.
Right.
What do you want to go do? Do you have the capabilities? Yes or no? Again, just like a little iterative decision making. Okay, let's say you want to open up a metal fabrication shop because you just think that's awesome. Like
my brother's a blacksmith. So
okay, cool.
I'm totally into this.
You're like, this is awesome. I want to do metal fabrication.
Which I suck at.
Okay, so this is perfect.
Okay, yeah.
Like this is absolutely perfect.
I love everything about what
and you're like, hey, I want to go do this.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so you have this regular job, all right? You're working at the Harley dealership, okay? Yep. So you're working at the Harley dealership.
With people who are awesome at metal fabrication.
Yes, and so you're inspired by that. You're like, hey, I want to go start my own fabrication shop. Well, before you do that, can you actually do metal fabrication?
I cannot.
Okay, so no, you can't. Okay, so yes, we could have gone down this path, but no, you can't. So no is over here. Okay, so here's our desires, capabilities over here. There's a gap.
Right.
How do you bridge the gap? Oh, you have to learn a skill set. How can you learn a skill set? Can you YouTube it? Maybe.
Yeah.
You could. Danny Ziem started his print shop by YouTube, FYI.
Yeah.
Which is incredible.
YouTube University's got some amazing stuff.
Again, desire and capabilities. Right. Maybe you learn that way. Can you learn that way? Okay. Jen Tarantino, that works for us at Echelon Front, our ops manager, our director of operations. She's freaking incredible. Her son loves blacksmithing and making knives.
Sweet.
He's literally taught himself. He's taught himself by YouTube videos and reading books.
Yep.
He makes these awesome little knives out of railroad ties, like the nails and like different pieces
horseshoes
of metal,
and all that kind of
horseshoes
stuff.
and all that stuff. It's awesome. He did it by reading, studying, watching videos, and getting to work. Like actually getting hands-on and working those things. And so that's what you have to think about. Again, the honest self-assessment, the evaluations. Can you learn that way? Me? Maybe. But guess what? If I wanted to go do metal fabrication, I would take some nighttime classes.
Yeah.
And before anybody goes, oh man, at night I need my rest. I got all this. There are single parents. There are single parents right now that are taking nighttime college classes so that they can get a degree to better themselves in their workplace. So I don't want to hear your excuses. I saw my dad doing it. I saw my mom doing it. I would come home or I would, from sports or whatever else, and my dad would be asleep in the recliner with a stack of books in his lap of him reading and studying for paramedic school to be an EMT. So I don't ever want to hear people like, well, it's a nighttime class. So, so before I get too fired up about that, I'm going to throttle back.
It's just evident. If that is the excuse that you're making,
then you'll never go do it.
Right.
You're never going to do it.
Your desire's not there. Find the next thing.
Well, and that was the thing is I love that you said the desire's not there. Is that was actually going to be my closing thing is like all this works only if your desire is there. Talk is cheap. If you actually wanted to do it, you'll do it. Hey, I want to lose 30 pounds. Okay, cool. You can do that. That's actually easy to do. Like Justin has people do it all the time. Like I've helped people do it. I mean, my last MMA fight, I cut 42 pounds in, what was it, 42 or 47? No. It was, I went from 217 to 175 in 6 weeks. I mean, now that was a long time ago. But so when people are like, oh, I can't lose weight. Yes, you can. You don't have the desire to put in the hard work. Mm-hmm. So to go back what we're talking about, the metal fabrication, okay, can you teach yourself through books and YouTube? That's literally going to be the cheapest way to do it. Next step, do a nighttime class. Like go do some nighttime college classes. Get some credits. Go to a an actual trade school. They have nighttime trade school classes. So that when you're working your regular job, you can go do this stuff at nighttime. Or do it during the daytime and work a regular job at nighttime, And so there's all these options. It's just people aren't willing to put in the work. And there are people, and this isn't just for single people. There are people that literally have families of 5 that are doing what we're talking about right now. It's just a desire thing. And so you have to be honest with yourself and ask yourself, is this what I really want to do? Yes or no? If it's a yes, then you'll find a way. And there's so many resources. I mean, think about people have been doing what we're talking about forever. Look at the resources that we have in 2023. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. You literally can get on your phone and Google, how can I, and then fill in the blanks, and it's going to tell you what to do. Yeah. You're going to have pages of information for you to search through. So,
and I would really encourage people that, like, okay, so we'll run this scenario of my metal fabrication shop.
Yep.
So I take my first nighttime class.
Yeah.
And
yes. Let's keep running through it.
I'm terrible at metal fabrication.
Cool. Right? Yeah. You're brand new. Everyone sucks when they're brand new.
So, but okay. So if I'm 6 months into it and I'm still bad, right? But this is what I want to do. But I have let's say I have a great mind for business, right?
There we go.
I can still have the metal fabrication shop.
Yes.
You can run well.
And you just hire talent.
Yeah.
There's so many ways to do these things.
And then I can be around all the stuff that I want to be around. I can take the business classes that I need in order to run a good business. Yep. I can go figure things out and go find the guys that can do it and are really skilled.
And then you can create a culture that they don't have in that industry, that they now feel appreciated. They're taken care of. You give them like equity in the company as it grows and expands. Like, you're changing people's lives. And you still have the satisfaction of being around something that you like. And then you're honoring God with your finances. You're honoring God with your time. And also you're pursuing of him and then growing the kingdom and making it towards an environment where, like, when people come into work, like, you're playing Christian music and you have a Bible study in the morning to kick off the day. That's part of the work day. They get paid to read and learn about learn about Jesus. And you can do this.
Into it.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. And so I think, again, people their ego gets in the way on this question. And it's really hard for them to fully surrender themselves. I mean, I don't want to share the story because I know I'm going to have Stephen on here. But I mean, right now, Stephen and his wife are a great example of just completely, fully surrendering everything to God. Same with their brother, his brother Austin and his wife Morgan. It's the same thing. Like, they've just completely, fully surrendered. And it's been cool to see, like, them like walk that path. And I've gotten a lot from it. I've learned and grown, I think, just from watching and listening and learning from them as well, which has been incredible.
That's awesome, man. It's crazy to think that, the paths that we want to take, that we can be stopped by such simple obstacles. And it goes back to what you're saying. If the desire's not there, it's never going to happen. But if you determine, okay, hey, I'm at the end of, in my metal fabrication company, I really want to do this. But by the end of the first month of that first class that I'm taking, I'm like, you know what? Actually, I hate metal fabrication. I just liked watching American Chopper. Right. But
there's a lot of people, I think, that figure that out.
Yeah. But then we just go back to the next O. Right? Then that OODA, the reason it's called an OODA Loop is because it starts over. Yep. All right. Hey, you know what? I really thought I was into metal fabrication. I liked being around it at the Harley shop. Not only do I suck at it, but now I'm just the shine is worn off of it. This isn't really what I want to do. So now we go back to orient.
Yeah.
Like, let's figure out what the next thing is.
Yeah.
So you brought up MMA. And we do have a question from this man's name is Josh Strasburger Actual.
Oh my God.
He says, "What was your MMA camp like? What was your fight camp routine like in your MMA days?"
Oh, good old Josh. Mm-hmm. Oh, you mean the Josh Strasburger that I'm business partners with on the path, and also Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu Ministry.
Yes,
freaking knucklehead.
Yep.
So
I'm also curious about this though.
Yeah, I would, as soon as I committed to a fight, like, I remember that last one, and again, this is just amateur MMA, so this is nothing serious. This is not professional, like people are like, oh, you fought UFC? No, the UFC is a league. I fought MMA. Mixed martial arts is different, and it was in Mississippi and Tennessee. And it was just amateur. So this was not like a huge thing. And now I loved it and I enjoyed it. And man, two of my coaches actually just got their black belts, which they should have had years ago. Andy Urick and Zach Underwood, two of my original coaches, Jake Underwood as well. The Underwood brothers, those were my coaches. Joe Pass, those guys really helped when I was getting out of the military, transition over, and they were teaching me jiu-jitsu and just putting together the kickboxing, Muay Thai that I knew over the years in boxing. But when I would commit to a fight, something would just change my mind. I don't mean people are like, oh, I just see red. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. But it's that commitment. It's just like the commitment. It's like when you sign the contract. I think, who would say that? Who had that quote? Kobe Bryant?
Maybe.
Yeah. Mamba mentality, Kobe
Bryant. Yeah, that's Kobe.
He would talk about like when you sign the contract with, you're signing a contract, and as an athlete, like, you got to sign the contract with yourself. And I love that mindset. I've actually talked about that with Anthony Kronk. Again, one of my black belts here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that trains with me at 5. It's just, I think humans, we fail to sign contracts with ourselves in regards to being husbands, being wives, being fathers, mothers, business partners, employees. We have to be mindful of, like, hey, the contract you sign, you need to fulfill that obligation.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we all signed a contract at one point in time, but are we fulfilling that obligation? And so as a fighter, anytime I committed to a fight, it was my focus. And there was zero chance I was not going to not get that work done. And, I had a hard time with professional athletes that don't make weight. Fighters that don't make weight. There's literally zero excuse for you not to make weight. Do you know why people don't make weight? Because they're lazy.
Yeah.
That's the only reason. Unless you get sick. But guess what? I had hand, foot, mouth disease in and out of the doctors in the hospital. And guess what I still was doing? Cutting weight for my fight. I had it 2 weeks before one of my fights. Ooh. Where I had the skin peeling off the bottoms of my feet. Peeling off my hands. Mm-hmm. My mouth and my throat was blistered. I had to drink a numbing medicine just to drink water.
Yeah.
So again, I don't have a lot of empathy or sympathy, whatever the proper word is for this situation, for people that don't make weight, because even being in and out of the doctors and supposed to be going to the hospital in the emergency room for hand, foot, mouth disease, I still cut down to 170 and made weight for my fight. So it's, do you really want it? And so when it came down to me fighting, I made a commitment. I made a commitment to myself and also to Amanda. And we also had an understanding of what it was going to take for me to fulfill this commitment.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I had to cut a lot of weight, I know it's simple math. Calories burned needs to be more than the calories consumed.
Yep.
And if I'm burning more calories than I'm consuming, guess what's going to happen? I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to lose body fat. And I was very strategic with tracking everything. Yep. Every calorie consumed and every calorie burned. Like, everything was consumed and calculated for. Every meal was prepped. I didn't eat anything that wasn't pre-prepped. And if I did, I would reformulate all my calculations to see how it would affect it.
Dang.
I would wake up and for that last cut, because it was a big cut in a short period of time, what we just talked about, like, every rep counted, every single thing that I did. And so right next to my bed, I put an Aerodyne, or like an assault bike, like an Echo bike, like Aerodyne bike. Yeah. Those, they call them the Echo bike, the Rogue, but the old school Schwinn Aerodyne bike.
Oh, yeah.
Things are miserable. That was right next to my bed. My alarm was on the other side of it. And I lived in a small little house in Mississippi. And so I would have to reach across it to shut off my alarm. And since I was already sitting on the bike to get to my alarm, I literally would just go, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I would start doing it, and I would do 45 minutes of that first thing when I woke up. And then I would immediately consume protein right afterwards. And that would aid in me losing fat like no other. It would fall off of me. And that was non-negotiable. That happened every single day. And then, obviously my jiu-jitsu training, my stand-up training, my sparring, and then I would do pool work as well. I would do sprints in the pool where I'd actually be running in the pool, like running sprints, and then swimming sprints as well. And I would,
And on top of that, you were
also working a full-time job.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Yeah. Right.
And yeah. And
dude, so that's insane. And
and actually at this time, Amanda and I, for that last fight, Amanda and I were separated. Well, we still had a good relationship.
Right.
And we were separated. But there was times where I'd get done with work and I lived like 45 minutes from work with traffic. Mm-hmm. And so I would get done with work and I would drive all the way back towards where I lived to pick up the kids from daycare. And the lady, Ella, who watched them at the time, she was super awesome. She always knew, like, by the time I got there, I'm like literally getting there as fast as I can. They were like the last two kids that I'd be picking up from daycare. I would grab them. I'd have all my stuff and all their stuff already packed. So in the morning when I dropped them off, I had all their stuff in my truck. I would grab them. Her house was right by my house. They would go use the restroom, grab snacks, go back in the truck, and then I would drive an hour in traffic to the gym to make it to evening classes.
Good.
And they would sit and watch me train. And then we'd go grab dinner, and then we'd go home. I'd get them showered, put them in bed. We'd spend we'd spend our time together. Like, we're talking we had an hour drive there talking. They'd watch me train, hour drive back talking after dinner, get them showered up, ready for bed, do our nighttime thing. And then, the next day they go to daycare or to Amanda. And yeah, I would do that and was training also. And so,
good gravy,
yeah.
Man.
And there was times that I still had to get cardio in and they, it's their bedtime. And you know what? I'd put them in. I had this little stroller thing that it would I could run with, but also hooked up to my bike. So there were some nights I would be getting like a 5 to 7 mile run in while they're asleep. They're all bundled up in blankets in that stroller, and I'm getting my nighttime cardio in while they're sleeping, or I'm riding my bike in the neighborhood while they're sleeping, and then I would just bring them up into the garage, and I just scoop them up out of there, and they're wrapped up in a blanket. They're out cold the whole time, and then I just lay them into bed. They're out cold, and they never knew the difference. But I spent a lot of miles while I was running or riding the bike while the girls were asleep.
That's great. And how old were they around this time? I mean, they would have been pretty
3.
little. Yeah.
3.
Good.
3.5.
Man.
So I just.
So
do you want it?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm hearing.
Do you want it?
Right? Is that you can make excuses or you can make things happen, and I don't hear a lot of excuses in that. So what was the?
And so again, that's one example of 7 fights. I had 7 fights. That was the only one where Amanda and I were separated, and that was a lot to do. But again, and she also helped me a lot during that. Even though I'm sorry, not separated, divorced, right?
Right.
She helped a lot with that because again, she was a great human. We shared that on the first episode, and we'll have her. It was just like
I got to meet her.
Yes.
At the mustard.
Yes, the muster. And so she was awesome, but I also was like, no, these are my time. This is my time with the girls. I want to spend my time with them.
Yeah.
But all the other fights, her and her parents helped a lot with it. There'd be time. I have pictures of me and videos of me sparring and doing jiu-jitsu and working the heavy bags with the girls literally in their car seat rockers. Next on the wall where it's Amanda's at the gym hanging out and the girls literally they're sitting in their car seats and I'm sitting there training and sparring and
that's wild.
Hitting the heavy bag. And then, so we would do, she'd be up there while I would be training and stuff like that. So
what was this is a personal question, right?
Yeah.
This didn't come off of personal and me asking, right? I'm not getting ready to ask you a personal question.
Okay. Yeah.
So what was the catalyst for you getting out of MMA? Was it stuff with Echelon Front, or was it just one of those things where it was time?
So that fight, we were still divorced, and then a few months later is when we made like that decision to get back together.
Yeah,
and try to make it work. And in order for that to work, we had to just have that commitment, that full commitment to each other.
Yeah.
And the training, honestly, it wasn't worth it. We needed to really focus on each other. And so training jiu-jitsu wasn't a priority for me anymore. Training MMA wasn't a priority anymore. I mean, when I say we had to cut things and people out of our lives to focus on that marriage working, like we cut things and people out of our lives to make the marriage work. And MMA was just one of those things at the time. And also it's like, man, yeah, I did well as an amateur, but I wasn't a great fighter. I was 6-1, but I wasn't a great fighter. I was scrappy. I could fight. I was a freaking team guy.
Yeah.
And I fought above my weight classes. I cut weight classes. But I wasn't a great fighter. So I never had this misconception that like, man, if I go pro and I get some pro fights under my belt, the UFC's coming.
Yeah.
And even then, back at this time, this is 2015. Back then, guys that are fighting in the UFC weren't making a lot of money.
Right.
And now the big names were, the main events were, but it's not like it is right now. I mean, I know of guys that were fighting in the UFCs that had their cars repoed because they couldn't pay a parking ticket. Yeah. So, it's just like one of those things. It's like, what's the priority? Me chasing something that's not going to be a reality for what? My ego? Or what's the priority? Oh, it's being a good husband and being a good father. What does that mean? Well, that means me not being gone 3 hours a night at the gym every night training.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was a no-brainer. Like, okay, I loved it. When I wasn't fighting, I missed it, and I loved my coaches and all those guys I talked about. I mean, I have still great connections with them, nothing but love for them. And I mean, they really helped me transition during a very hard time in my life. And I'm forever indebted to Jake and Zach and Andy and Joe and Teddy and those guys. But for me to continue fighting, it wasn't a priority. It wasn't the right thing to keep doing.
Yeah, and you're totally right about that. A good friend of mine that I used to travel with doing evangelism stuff, his name's Ron Waterman. He was a UFC super heavyweight champ.
Oh, sweet.
And then he would go and fight on the weekends and then have to teach art during the week because that is actually what paid his bills, was as a high school art teacher.
Yeah, I mean...
Which is crazy that you're thinking like, oh, so UFC super heavyweight champ, a division they don't even have anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And what paid his bills was being an art teacher at a high school.
Because he probably maybe got 5 and 5, meaning he got $5,000 to make weight and show up, and then $5,000 if he won.
Yeah.
Like I saw pro fighters making $250, meaning they got paid $250.
Oh, good grief.
For making weight and showing up, and then another $250 if they won, and they were the main event.
That's crazy, man.
So it's like, and then think about like all the food and like, so that's why sponsorships is a big thing for fighters, like a big thing for fighters, because that's how they make the extra, and then ticket shares and all that stuff.
All that kind of junk. Well, and
it was fun. I'm glad I did it. It was cool. Learned a lot, but I wasn't going to be the next UFC champion.
But this is also like this is a really important lesson for our listeners who are going through this process now. Is you're constantly, and he talks about it here in the book, is like the ability to reevaluate. Is something in your life happened that with you and Amanda where, hey, you know what, we're making this commitment to one another, that we're going to work on our marriage, see if we can reclaim our marriage and get that back if God will restore it. Then if that happens, that now becomes priority. And because that's priority, now I have to reevaluate what the things are that are going to help in that goal, and what things are that, what the fat is that has to be cut. Even if it's something that I really enjoyed, if it's not the best thing, then it's got to go. And that, I think that's such an important lesson for people to learn. But I also think that it's one that brings up a lot of other questions. How do I, when I'm going through the reevaluation process, how do I get rid of good things that aren't the best thing?
How do I get rid of good things that are not the best thing?
Yeah, because like as a fighter, like being an MMA fighter, it was fulfilling. It was a good thing, but it was getting in the way of you reaching your ultimate goal, which was restoration in your marriage and getting your family back. So how do you get rid of things, even though they're good? You may enjoy them. How do you figure out what the things are that need to go when they're not like glaringly bad things?
Yeah, I think it's an evaluation of what do those things or do those people serve? Mm-hmm. Is it you or is it what you're trying to do? So for me, I was trying to get my family back. Black and white.
Yeah.
And does it help me get my family back? Yes or no? Yes or no? Okay, I want to lose 30 pounds.
Yeah.
Does this food help me achieve that goal? Yes or no? And that's what I loved about 75 Hard is Andy Frisella was super strict on the, strict diet, not this BS. It fits within my macros.
Right.
Okay, that can work. But if you're trying like for hardcore, like a hardcore change, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Now I understand the fits within my macros thing for like sustainability and long debt. But if you're trying to make a drastic change, which to get your marriage back from divorce, it requires drastic changes. This isn't like, we'll make these small, no, drastic changes.
Yeah.
And so you have to ask yourself, what does it serve? Does it serve you for your selfish reasons or their selfish reasons? Or does it serve what you're trying to achieve? And if it helps you achieve those things, then that's, and so I can't remember exactly the conversation where it came from, but I had on my whiteboard in my office written for a very long time was to be a good Christian, good husband, good father, good member of Echelon Front, and good friend. And if it didn't help me achieve any of those, I wasn't going to do it.
Yeah.
And so that was the evaluation for me.
Yep. So if it's not something that's helping you achieve the ultimate goal, then
get rid of it.
Yeah. Dude, how many things in our lives would be different if that is how we evaluated like everything, right?
Drastically different in a good way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Right. I'm thinking right now. So my brothers and I know you're not a video game player. We were whenever we were growing up. Mm-hmm. And thinking about the amount of hours that I wasted doing that when I could have been doing things that were leading to my goals. Now, there was a purpose in fellowship and all those kinds of things, but there were hours and hours and hours. And I look at a lot, not just, I want to say it's just students, but it's not, right? Because I look at kind of across the board at some of even like my friends that are spending hours as, adults almost in their 40s on Minecraft, mm-hmm. where they're just like, I hammered away at all of these blocks today and yada, yada. And then we'll have a conversation later that's like, I just don't have time to do X, Y, and Z. And if I was able to do this, I could really accomplish my goals. Yeah. And like, you spent 5 hours mm-hmm. on a video game, chipping away at dirt.
Yep.
Now I've got a way to reframe that question. Where those 5 hours did they help? Did they add to that mm-hmm. that ultimate goal? I think that's
and it's wild. When you ask those questions that are binary, it makes it super easy for everybody to be able to like honestly answer those things.
Yeah.
Now they can lie, but then that goes to the whole discipline is rooted in the truth that we tell ourselves, and that's another issue that we
needs to be
all
on the flag.
struggle with, which we will have.
Yeah.
We will have some of that merch soon in the future, but I was going to say, we had our individual FTXs about a month and a half ago, and there's this guy that attended. He was super brilliant. Like, he was so smart. And I'm just like, man, I want to hang out with this guy.
Yeah.
And I'm going to kind of butcher a little bit of what was said between us because I wish I would have captured it on video. Mm-hmm. It would have been an incredible, like, back and forth conversation on discipline. Because I said the whole discipline is rooted in the truth that we tell ourselves. Yeah. And he challenged that. He goes, well, I don't think that's accurate. I said, okay, cool. Like, I'm not going to argue. Like, if you don't think it's accurate, then okay, it's not. And I sat there and he's like, well, this is why. And I'm like, okay. And so again, I wasn't going to get sucked into it. Because if he really didn't think, and then, okay, that's fine. But again, that's him lying to himself because he doesn't want to have the discipline accountability type of conversation.
Yeah.
Meaning self-accountability, because that's what discipline gives you, your ability to be accountable to yourself. And so anyway, so we start talking through some stuff, and the guy is super smart, and he would say something, and I would just ask him a question. He'd be like, dang it. Because he would recognize what he was saying wasn't accurate. Now I'm filtering what he was saying because we want to keep this good. So what you can only imagine what he was saying made it even funnier, bro. He's
no
like,
doubt.
And I'm like, the guy was awesome. Loved the guy. Had a really, really good time with that guy. And so we were talking through it, and he's like, I said, well, what are some things that you think you could be a little more disciplined with, or, that might help you out? He goes, he's like, well, let's say for eating. He goes, the whole discipline. He's like, I know what I need to be doing to get healthy, but, actually there is freedom in not, because he was also challenging the whole discipline equals freedom thing, and saying that, there's actually freedom in him being out of shape. And I'm like, okay. I was like, how so? He goes, well, I can just eat whatever I want. I said, you're right, you can. I said, but doesn't it kind of suck, like not being able to do things physically? I was like, do you have any physical restrictions by being, as you just said, obese? This is not me. These are his words. He's saying, and he goes, dang it. He goes, yeah. You know what sucks is getting out of breath just to tie my shoes. He goes, it actually hurts to tie my shoes. He goes, it hurts to get out of bed. He goes, this day hurts. I'm glad that I'm here, but man, everything hurt. And he just was realizing all these things. And what's cool is he was realizing it just by us having a basic conversation. And I had so much, like, his mindset was incredible, and his takeaway was awesome. And it was very fulfilling, seeing this guy realize hey man, I need to get my health back in order. Yeah. And we talked about, and the reason why I'm sharing that story is one of the things that him and I talked about offline was, hey, you need to do an evaluation of does this help you achieve your goals, yes or no? And if it's a no, then don't do it or get rid of it. And he was like, that's going to be really hard. I'm like, exactly. Which hard do you want? The hard of being obese and having a hard time literally tying your shoes and getting out of bed and not being able to be physically active when you want to be? Or just a little bit of discipline of deciding, hey, you know what? These next 2 weeks, I'm not going to drink any sodas. And then when I get used to that, then I'm going to add walking 30 minutes a day.
Yeah. And
then I'm just going to increase my protein slowly, right? And I was small iterative decisions. And it was really cool for him, understanding, okay, does it serve my goals, yes or no? If it's a no, then I'm not going to do it.
Yep. There's a lot of people, we try to do at least once a year, we do a fast, as a church.
Nice.
Right. And there's a lot of our folks that give up sodas. And it's amazing to me how many of them after 40 days, we'll do it for, maybe 21 days, maybe 40 days, whatever it is. So they'll give up soda for that amount of time. On day 41 with their first, soda they have, they're like, oh, this is actually kind of gross.
Yeah. And then they don't want to drink it anymore.
They don't want to drink it anymore.
That's
right?
perfect.
Or they have to force themselves, they'll have one and then I really didn't enjoy that as much as I used to. I'm going to try it again.
But stop.
Yeah, exactly.
Stop.
Right. But it's that whole thing where we go back to devices and the stuff that we know. And I do think that it's interesting, when we think about discipline in those regards. Jocko said something at the muster. He says it a lot on his podcast. And it cracks me up, the interactions that he has with Echo, because when Jocko talks about being disciplined, he's like, people ask me how to be disciplined, be more disciplined. And Echo will kind of bounce back. He's like, that's not an answer.
Yeah.
Right. But in a way it is, right? Because there's no way to do something without doing that thing. Right. So it does make sense. But when you talk about discipline being rooted in the truth that you tell yourself, one of the things that right now is kind of like an epidemic is people self-diagnosing either neurodivergence or lack of the ability to have executive function, right? So we're talking about self-diagnosing. I don't want to be cautious about talking about this because neurodivergent is a thing, right? That can be diagnosed properly. But when we've read on WebMD and we, look at all these internet videos and we're like, oh, well, somebody who has executive function has trouble getting out of bed at 4 a.m. That must be it. Now I've got ADHD because that's what this says. Or, I feel socially awkward whenever I talk to girls. Whenever I'm, when I'm trying to ask a girl out on a date, I feel socially awkward. Therefore, I must have this neurodivergence. But those things start to happen, and then it's almost like because we're inundated and we see so many of these things around us, we've convinced ourselves that I can't do things because I have my executive function centers don't operate the way that they should, or I'm socially awkward and I'm neurodivergent because I have trouble, talking to girls. Well, maybe some of that is just like you've convinced yourself of it, but really what you need to do is to do a quick evaluation and just say, hey, is it just hard to get out of bed at 4 a.m.? Maybe that's just a hard thing to do. And you need to just figure out, hey, is this a thing I should be trying to do or not? Does this help me with my goals, or is getting out of bed at 4 a.m. unrealistic for me?
Yeah, if you're up until 1:30 in the morning doing other stuff, getting up at 4 a.m., 4:30 is probably not going to be the best thing for you.
Look, get out of my life.
Unless you see, but there's the thing.
It's a different story, right?
There's a different story. That's
right.
This is actually a necessity now. And like I was just sharing, like a lot of these times I've been up until 4 or whatever. Well, man, I've also like in the last 9 days, like there's been a few times where I've had to be up early. I only got a couple hours of sleep. It was just the situation they're in. But guess what? I had to get up. So guess what? I got up.
Right.
And so you have to understand, like, okay, do you need to get up at 4 a.m.? Yes or no? Here's the deal. If it's to achieve your goals and the only time to get that extra work in is between 4:30 to 6:30, then guess what? You'll get up.
Yeah.
If that's the only time that you can get the work done and you actually want to achieve what you're talking about, then you'll wake up at 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
If you don't need to, you're not going to wake up at 4:30. Nobody's waking up at 4:30 just to be awake.
No.
They're doing it to achieve their goals. So that's what it is.
Yeah. I just think that like the way that you put
it. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Good.
The reason why I would wake up to get on that Aerodyne bike, I would wake up an extra hour early. I don't like waking up early.
No.
You're
from California. None of y'all like waking up early.
Well, Jocko wakes up early.
It's because you're on the Pacific. Isn't he from Maine though?
Yeah, he's up at the Northeast.
Yeah. But those people in the Eastern time zone, they're just used to it.
They're just hard workers
they
up there.
That.
That's why Pete and all of them are just crushing it in life with Origin. But but because I just don't go to bed early. I don't make that a priority. And so I, again, would force myself to get up an extra hour early when I was in that fight camp because I had to be on the bike for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a non-negotiable. I had to be on that bike for 45 minutes. So, all right, I normally wake up at 5:45. Well, guess what? Now I'm waking up at 4:45 and I'm getting on the bike, right? And at 5:30, I'm done. And then now I can shower and I can drink my protein and okay, cool. Now I'm actually ahead of schedule slightly. But because I'd put in that work in the morning and I'd keep working throughout the day, when it came time where it was in the evening where I normally wouldn't be tired, guess what? I was tired at that point.
Yeah.
And so I was able to reprogram the way my body was able to function.
Yeah. That is one of the things, specifically talking about waking up early, that when Jordan Peterson was talking about what he does with his clinical clients, and I think this was in 12 Rules, that one of the very first things he tells his clients to do is to wake up early. Like, he doesn't care what time you go to bed, but you wake up at the same time every day. And that is one of the things that he has found in his practice helps most with depression, because there is a consistent point where you start the day. And whether that's, he doesn't care if it's 10 in the morning or if it's, 6 in the morning, whatever it is, you wake up, you get out of bed at the same time every day.
It's awesome.
And then it kind of sets, like you're talking about, by the time you're ready to go to bed, it's all that. All right, one of the other questions that we've got here, and this is from Readers Are Leaders 2. Yep, the number 2. Readers Are Leaders, the number 2. He says,
I like that play because it's like leaders are readers, meaning if you're a leader, you're going to read. Now, but he's saying if you read, you're a leader.
You're a leader. Boom.
I like it.
So he and I love this because you've already brought up the Marco's Pizza stuff. He wants to hear more about being a pizza delivery man as a former Navy SEAL and what changes you made to get where you are now.
Yeah, it's a good. I mean, I'll answer this one really quickly because I know we've talked about it a lot. And if you go listen to Jocko podcast, episode 46, 246, 309, like
episode 1 of the JP Dinnell podcast. We
yes,
talk about that too,
I mean, we really talk about all those. Talk about those in depth on Jocko's. We dove into it on episode 1 as well. I mean, for me, it was. I mean, what changed was me understanding, like, hey, like. I've got to make some changes in my life to get myself out of this situation. And it was that night that I was uncleaning the clogged drains. And, and I was frustrated because I was like, at one point I was the highest decorated E5 in the SEAL teams, and then now I'm cleaning clogged up drains at a pizza place while working for Echelon Front, which... It was just like, wait, okay, what am I doing? What do I want to be doing? What should I be doing?
That's a dichotomy in itself, man.
Yeah. Talk about just a humbling moment where, I mean, I remember on my second gig was on January 6th, and I was down in Key West giving a half-day workshop to an IT company. And I'm down there, suit and tie, giving this, half-day leadership workshop, fly back to, Memphis, Tennessee, and spend a little time with the man and the kids. Well, January 6th is our anniversary. So it's our anniversary that I'm speaking. I come home, spend a little bit of time with them. Well, it also had been snowing that day in Memphis. And my buddy Lee, who owned the pizza place, he had no delivery drivers that had four-wheel drive pickup trucks except for him and JP Dinnell. And so that night I went and was delivering pizzas in my four-wheel drive truck. Because he put on Facebook and Instagram, don't drive, we'll come to you. We have four-wheel drive vehicles. And we were slammed that night.
No doubt.
Because everything was shutting down in that town, right? It's North Mississippi. I mean, they think snow's coming. Everything shuts down.
Right, yeah.
When there's actual snow and ice, like everything's shut down. And so we were delivering pizzas all night, and I'm just like... what am I doing? You know what I mean? Like, I'm thankful for the opportunity I have. I'm super thankful for everything that my buddy gave me. But it's like, dude, I can't screw up what Jocko and Leif have given me in front of me. I need to be a better version of who I am to earn that seat every single day. Stop listening to the radio. Was only listening to podcasts, Jocko's podcast, a lot of different podcasts that are out there, just trying to get as much information as I could about leadership and business development. Not so much the leadership from other people outside of Jocko, but like business, like learning about how different people thought of business and how different. I was just consuming. I was reading like all different books all the time, and like that's all I was doing, and I was super hyper focused on how can I be a better version of who I am, and just made sure that I was like actually exemplifying and living the principles. And so for me, it was a mindset shift. And I remember that night cleaning out the drains, like I came home and it was late, and Amanda was in all three of our kids lived in one bedroom. And so Aiden was up on his bed. He had a little bunk bed. And then we had a queen size mattress on the floor because we couldn't put another bed in there. So we had enough room just for the mattress just in the corner, and the girls would sleep there. And I remember coming, I remember coming home and seeing Amanda just laying on the bed. You could just tell she just had a rough day. It was a long day. She was tired. She was just out cold. And both the girls were on either side of her, snuggled up into her, and Aiden was up there sleeping in his bed. And I just stood there in the door jamb, and I'm like looking at them. And like, we didn't have a dining room or a kitchen table for our family to eat dinner together. We used TV trays in the living room on the the couches, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I just knew I wasn't putting them in the position that they needed to be in. And I was like, okay, I have this opportunity in front of me. You got to get your stuff together. And I remember just going, dude, you've got to get your stuff together. And then also we went to church, and it was about the same time that we heard one of our pastors talking about tithing as an act of worship.
Yeah.
And for us, it was like now we always would try to tithe and tithe regularly because I knew it was the right thing to do, but my mindset was different. It wasn't tithing as an act of worship. And when we started tithing as an act of worship, changed everything.
Yeah.
Not just our finances,
right,
but everything. Like our relationship, just everything in our life changed. And it's cool because our pastor did a really good sermon about tithing. And I mean, we're like finishing it up. And today, Pastor Jed, phenomenal job, but Pastor Jeff Little, the senior pastor at Milestone Church that I go to in Keller, he was talking about it, and he was just like, it's in the Bible, literally in the Bible. He says, test me. Mm-hmm. Test me. See what I can do. Yeah. And now we didn't do it to test God, but like literally, it's in the Bible. It says, "Hey, do these things. Right. Test me." But it's when we change to just a mindset of like, hey, this is an act of worship. Like, thank you, Lord. Thank you for what you've given us. Thank you for restoring our marriage. Thank you that we're healthy. Thank you that our kids are happy. Thank you that we are all crammed into this house, because there's a lot of people that would love to have been in that house. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so I always go back to my worst day is somebody's dream.
Yeah.
My worst day is somebody's dream. And so when I would remind myself of my worst day is somebody's dream, it made it easy to wake up and be ready to attack the day. And I think that's something we can all remember, like myself included. Like that's something I need to get back to remembering is like, hey, my worst day is, I know now, current, like my worst day is somebody's dream, and they would love to have the problems that I have, and all the things that goes on in life. Like I also have to understand, like, dude, I'm so thankful because I don't deserve any of these things. And I think if we can also remember that, like, hey, none of us deserve any of these things.
Yeah.
Like even people that are like, man, things are so hard. You don't even deserve that grace that we've been given, And so there's times that, and I've seen that from, my parents and my dad. My dad had his arm amputated, and he's had his ups and downs, like dealing with that. But for somebody who, I would say it's safe to say, lost his identity by losing his arm. Not his identity in a bad way. I don't mean that in a negative way towards my father at all. But he's always worked with his hands. He's always done construction and cooking. He's the absolute best at both of those that I've ever met, because of his hard work and his dedication and his discipline to that craft. And so when you lose that ability to do that at a high level, it wrecks a lot of people. And so to see how he's dealt with those ups and downs, and yet he still tries to maintain a positive attitude, is impressive. And so it's just a quick little reminder to us all that, like, the things that we complain about, somebody would love to have those problems.
I'm looking at the book that Jason wrote. I'm looking at the title of it, and one of the things that stands out to me the most is that when you do as many reps as possible, you go to failure.
Yeah.
That's where, and whether you're doing a bodybuilding workout or a CrossFit workout, or working out just because you're with a personal trainer and I just want to be more fit, mm-hmm. right? Each one of those styles has somebody go to the point of failure, because that's when growth happens. That's when the muscle gets built. Mm-hmm. That's when your body goes into a mode where it gets to recover. As a leader, right? And we've talked about you working with Echelon Front as a leader. We've talked about you as a leader of the SEAL teams. We've talked about you as a husband and a father and a leader of your household. What does that, as many reps as possible, how can we take that and apply that moniker, I guess, or that principle how can we take that and apply it to the places where we lead?
I think this is a good question as we close it out. I think, so as you were saying that, I'm like listening and I'm thinking, and do one more came into my mind.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to switch over that mentality of like, do one more. And what's awesome about this is as many reps as possible. It's, hey, if you have 2 seconds left, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? If you're trying to get as many reps as possible, you're going to try to get one more.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, when they see that clock count down, it's like 5, 4, 3. What do most people do at that 3 mark?
Oh, hands on your head, try to get one last breath. Like, ooh. At least if I look like I'm working, then
exactly.
Yeah.
I see this at the muster all the time when we do the PTs.
Glad you
because
saw it in
people,
me at the muster.
I saw it in myself years ago, and that's why I've been trying to be like, all right, when that clock counts down and it starts going 3, 2, 1. I've watched people when they hear the 3. You know what people do? They stop working. Mm-hmm. And so I've challenged myself of one more rep. Just get one more. And so when you're thinking about that in the aspect of like what you just asked, what is one more thing that you can do to elevate yourself and the people around you? One more hug to your wife. One more note to your kids, like in their lunchbox that says, hey, I love you and I'm proud of you. One more phone call. Because here's the deal. We also don't know when there's ever going to come a time. I mean, I have a lot of names in my phone that I can never call again.
Yeah.
And every single one of those names, I wish I would have called them one more time. You know, I wish I would have called them one more time. And so I think you need to switch and challenge yourself to have the mindset of one more rep, because that counts for anything. Like one more chapter of a book, one more page of a book, one more Bible study with your kids, one more conversation with your kids. When you're leaving your kid's room and they're like, hey, daddy, and you're like, I told you to go to bed. Hey, go have one more conversation with your kid. Like, just, hey, what's up, sweetie? Hey, earlier today you said this, and you're just, okay, talk about it. And then, obviously there is a point where you have to like, hey, go to bed. But I promise you, it ain't that first time. It ain't the first time. And a lot of us, we violate that because it's the way we're programmed. This is we're combating a tendency that we all have. And that's what, the thing that I love what Cody says, we teach behaviors and tendencies at Echelon Front. And the tendencies that we talk about, the mindsets for victory, they're the opposite of our natural tendencies. So the get one more rep is the opposite of our natural tendencies, because when we hear that 3, 2, 1, we think that we're done, but we're not done. We're not done until the goes off. Yeah. And so, that's where you have to go to war with your complacency. That's the thing. You have to go to war with complacency, because the complacency is going to tell you, hey, you've done enough. But if you challenge yourself to one more rep, I think that will help you declare war on complacency. And that's how you restore your marriage. That's how you restore your faith. That's how you restore your health. That's how you restore your family. That's how you restore your business. And that's ultimately how we restore this nation. So I think we all just have to challenge yourself to go do one more thing.
Dude, that got me. Like we got a 15-month-old in the house.
Yeah.
Like I was telling you, I woke up at 5 a.m. I went to bed at 2 and woke up at 5 a.m. because, he needed something. And
so sometimes with kids, now I know our children are protected.
Sure.
But we also know that our children are being attacked.
Yeah.
And so I challenge our listeners, if your kids are having a hard time, why? Is there spiritual warfare going on in your house?
Yeah.
That they can't communicate to you? And so the only thing that they know is, hey, mommy and daddy keep me safe. And so if you are holding your kid, and I don't know about you, but most of the time when my kids would wake up and I'm holding them, I'm like singing praise and worship or praying over my kid. Yep. So guess what? Your kids, something's going on that's disturbing them from their sleep. And they know that you and your wife are their safety. Yeah. And if they go to you, boom, those things go away. So there might be something to that aspect to think about as well. So.
Yeah, but that just gets me, setting that frame of mind now.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Before he can talk, before in his memory, I will disappoint him. Is setting that idea of one more dude. I love that.
I love it, man. All right. I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you all for supporting each of you. Thank you all for the support each of you have given us by listening, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. It actually legitimately helps us out a lot. If you want to follow us on social media, I am at JP Dinnell. That's 2 N's and 2 L's. Lucas is at LUCASPINCKARD. Make sure you're also following at Echelon Front on Instagram. If you want to learn more about what we do at Echelon Front, go to echelonfront.com. I would love to see/meet you guys at a future event, or for one of our instructors at Echelon Front to come work with you and your company. If you want to, you can also check out at Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu _USA. It's a ministry that I'm a part of with Isaac Tauefa, Stephen Little, Josh Strasberger. We also have a podcast called the Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And we're also doing events about once a month. We try to do an event at different gyms in the DFW area. And also we have traveled to Colorado, and we're hoping to travel to more in the future. We start off by doing a free jiu-jitsu seminar. Then somebody shares their testimony, and then we open it up to an open mat for some good training. It's an awesome ministry that we are all able to be a part of. I'm also a part of a Texas beef company called Little Cattle Co. My best friend, get that beef. My best friend, Stephen Little, started that company back in 2017. We are at Little Cattle Co. on Instagram. My wife and I partnered with them earlier this year. The website is littlecattle.co. We can deliver beef anywhere to the lower 48 states, and we can also send custom boxes of beef to your customers and clients if you're looking for a unique way to show them appreciation during this time of the year or any time of the year, especially with that upcoming Christmas season. I'm also a partner with my other best friend, Josh Strasberger, for a printing company called On the Path Printing. If you want to follow us on Instagram, we are at On the Path Printing, and we are hoping to be printing shirts in the December timeframe for our customers. And as we close it out, I just want to thank you guys and reiterate you and challenge you to go find a few areas of your life that you can get one more rep in. And I just want to thank you guys always for your support. This has been the JP Dinnell Podcast, episode 10.